I had spent most of my adult life in Guangzhou, far from my hometown nestled in the hills. Returning home wasn't a decision I made lightly. The memories of my childhood were a tangle of neglect and unmet expectations. My parents had always been preoccupied, often too consumed by their own struggles to notice me. Now, years later, I returned as a stranger, both to them and to the house that once barely felt like home. As I walked through the village, old neighbors greeted me warmly, their smiles laced with curiosity. "Lin Yu, you've done so well for yourself," they said. My parents, Jen and Mei, greeted me with awkward smiles. They barely knew who I had become, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted them to know. After dinner that first night, my mother, Mei, handed me my sister Sunny's portfolio. "She wants to follow in your footsteps," she said with a hopeful look. Sunny, the youngest of us, had always been the favored one, the one who received the love and attention I yearned for. "And your brother, Ming," my father added, "his grades in math are awful. Maybe art school is an option for him too." Their words stung, not because they were asking for advice, but because their newfound interest in my success felt hollow, like a belated attempt to rewrite history. I flipped through Sunny's portfolio. It was decent, but far from remarkable. "She'll need a lot of work if she's serious about this," I said bluntly. My father bristled at my candor, but said nothing. The real reason for my visit was to renovate my grandparents' home. Over the years, many families had upgraded to multi-story houses, while our family home stood as a relic of the past, shadowed by taller buildings on either side. I had urged my grandmother, Nai Nai, to rebuild, but she always said, "That's your father's responsibility. He promised to do it when he returned." Years passed, and my father's promises remained unfulfilled. It wasn't until Grandpa was diagnosed with high blood pressure and a heart condition that Nai Nai finally agreed. "Lin Yu will pay for the renovation," she announced one evening. "And the property certificate will be in her name." My father's reaction was immediate. "How can that be? This is the ancestral home. It should belong to Ming." "If you want Ming to have it," Nai Nai replied calmly, "then you and he should pay for the renovations." My mother chimed in, "Isn't that how it's done in the city? Lin Yu has her own place in Guangzhou. Why would she want this old house?" I didn't argue. Instead, I said, "If I'm paying for it, it will be mine. But I'm doing this for Nai Nai and Grandpa. They deserve to enjoy their remaining years comfortably." In 2 months, I had the first 3-story building in the village constructed. Neighbors marveled at the speed and quality of the work. I spared no expense, hiring extra workers to complete the project quickly. Once it was finished, I demolished the small storage sheds out front and built a row of ghost houses. Mr. Zhao, a retired art teacher who often brought his students to the village for outdoor sketching, began using the ghost houses as accommodations. The arrangement benefited everyone. My grandparents enjoyed the company, the students had a place to stay, and my grandparents earned a modest income by providing meals. Sunny's first attempt at the art exam ended in failure. My parents, desperate to see her succeed, sent her back for additional tutoring. Ming, now 16, joined her, saying he too wanted to prepare for the exam. Their efforts, however, were half-hearted. Mr. Zhao confided in me, "Lin Yu, neither of them has your talent or dedication." "Don't tell me that," I said. "Tell their parents. They need to hear the truth." Despite his polite words, Mr. Zhao was unimpressed. One day, he pointed to a sketch Sunny had drawn and said to my mother, "Back then, Lin Yu created something similar, and I kept it in my studio. A collector once offered 200,000 yuan for it, but I refused to sell." My mother's eyes lit up. "Why didn't you sell it?" Mr. Zhao chuckled. "Lin Yu and I agreed it would be better as a keepsake." "What about Sunny's work?" she asked, hopeful. Next time, have her use cheaper paper. This one costs 5 yuan, and it's wasted on such a drawing. My mother walked away, visibly disappointed. Cindy's second attempt at the exam fared no better. This time, while her art score was passable, her academic subjects dragged her down. My father exploded with anger when he saw her dismal English grade. "Your sister got full marks in English at your age," he bellowed. His frustration mirrored the anger he often directed at me in my youth. But back then, I would have given anything for a sliver of his attention. Now, his words only reminded me of how little he'd cared when it mattered. By the third year, both Cindy and Ming took the exam together. My father warned Cindy, "If you fail again, you'll have to find a job. We can't afford to keep supporting you." He turned to Ming and added, "Don't expect endless chances like your sister. If you don't make it, you'll work too." When the results came in, Ming had narrowly missed the cutoff, while Cindy failed once again. True to his word, my father sent Cindy to work in a factory in the city. She left without argument, carrying the weight of her failures with her. Ming, however, was spared. He can go to a junior college, my father decided. His favoritism was as clear as ever, and it didn't escape my notice, or Cindy's. Over time, Cindy drifted further from the family, marrying a co-worker and having a child by the time she was 22. Ming, on the other hand, remained at home, living off our parents and showing little ambition. Years passed. My grandparents eventually passed away, and I left the house in Mr. Zhao's care. My parents occasionally asked about me, but they never reached out directly. By then, I was married with a daughter of my own. I had little reason to return to the village, and even less desire to reconnect with my parents. When my mother fell ill and my father needed surgery, I sent money but offered no other support. They treated me as invisible for most of my life, and now I returned the favor. Friends and relatives tried to mediate, saying, "Lin Yu, if they hadn't been so strict with you, you might not have achieved what you have today." Their words infuriated me. "Suffering doesn't lead to success," I replied. "It's something you endure, not something you seek." I succeeded despite my parents, not because of them. One sunny afternoon, as I watched my daughter play in the garden, I finally confronted a painful truth: my parents resented me. I had arrived when they were unprepared for the responsibilities of parenthood. My birth forced my mother to give up her job and my father to grow up too soon. By the time Cindy and Ming were born, they had accepted their roles and showered them with the love and care I had never received. Did they hate me? Perhaps not consciously. But their indifference left scars that never fully healed. And yet, I bore them no hatred in return. My success, my independence, and the life I built were mine alone, and for that, I was grateful. I may never reconcile with my parents, and the melody of indifference between us will likely persist until the end. But I've made peace with the past. My journey was shaped by neglect, but it was also defined by resilience. And that, above all, is what I choose to carry with me.